The tremor started not in my hands, but in the silence. It was a Tuesday evening, a night like any other, or so I believed. The kitchen, washed in the pale gold of overhead light, was filled with the usual clink and shuffle of setting the table. I had made lasagna, Aiden's favorite, hoping maybe it would win back some semblance of warmth. But instead of gratitude, or even just his usual polite interest, I was met by something else entirely. Absence. Aiden was sitting at the table, hunched forward over his phone, his thumb tracing silent circles across the screen. His posture was just shy of defensive, his body turned slightly away from me as if he could shrink the room's dimensions by force of will alone. Usually, almost always, he put his phone away when we sat down to eat, like a ritual, a sign that the day's distractions had been tucked to the side. But tonight, the device glowed between us, its blue-white light flickering across his features, illuminating a faint, private smile. That smile wasn't for me. In that instant, I knew it with the certainty that only intuition provides. A cold knot began to form in my stomach, slow and suffocating. It wasn't jealousy, not yet. It was something deeper, more primal, a gut-level sense that the ground beneath my feet was shifting. I remember how suddenly every sound in the kitchen felt too loud. The scrape of my chair, the metallic clink of my fork against the ceramic plate, Aiden's soft, involuntary chuckle as something on his phone caught his amusement. That sound, intimate and quiet, twisted inside me. For years, I'd believed our life together was built on something solid and true. A decade of routines, shared jokes, late-night confessions over wine, silent touches in the dark. But that night, what I heard was the first tiny crack in the foundation, the first hairline fracture spreading out from some hidden source of pressure. My name is Alara Bennett. For 10 years, I had been Aiden Parker's wife, his partner, his anchor, his best friend. That's what I thought anyway. We'd built a home together, a seamless patchwork of cozy habits and mutual support. He was a successful architect. I was a marketing consultant. We were, by all appearances, the picture of a comfortable, stable marriage. Friends envied our easy smiles at dinner parties, the way he always touched my arm out of habit, the quiet teamwork of our daily routines. Only recently, as I looked back with harsher clarity, could I see what we really were. Secure, predictable, a little too perfect. We had just celebrated our 10th anniversary by throwing a lavish party. Gathered around us were friends and family, a swirl of laughter and unspoken assumptions. I remember feeling almost overwhelmed by happiness and so sure of us. The memory now felt like a cruel, mocking echo. That night, watching Aiden as he texted with someone I could not see, a prickle of unease crept across my skin. I forced my voice to sound natural as I asked, "Anything interesting?" My voice was steady, surprisingly so, but inside, my thoughts were a welter of confusion and dread. He startled, nearly dropping his phone, before locking the screen and sliding it into his pocket. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and for just a split second, a flash of something I couldn't name, guilt, perhaps, or maybe annoyance, crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the charming, easy smile that had once made me fall in love with him. "Just work emails, love. You know how it is," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. But his touch felt foreign. The warmth and pressure were there, but the connection wasn't. My skin crawled. In that moment, I knew he was lying, and I hated how easily he did it. The next few days blurred into a haze of heightened senses and small, stinging injuries. Aiden was distracted, disappearing into hushed phone calls in other rooms, finding reasons to stay late at the office with increasing regularity. Each carefully worded excuse carved a little deeper into the trust that had stood between us like a wall. I started noticing things. A faint, unfamiliar perfume clinging to his collar. New contacts listed on his phone under names I didn't recognize. Receipts for dinners at restaurants we'd never visited together. The air in our house went from warm and familiar to heavy, suffocating. A fog of secrets that settled over everything. Sleep became impossible. At night, I'd lie awake, staring up at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every conversation, every glance that felt off in hindsight. I didn't want to believe that what we had built together could be so fragile, so easily destroyed, but the more I tried to ignore my instincts, the louder they screamed. I became a stranger in my own life, picking through the evidence left behind by someone I thought I knew as well as I knew myself. One morning, as Aiden rushed out the door with barely a kiss, I realized with a shock that I no longer recognized the man I had married, or myself for that matter. The ache was physical, a raw place under my ribs that throbbed with every breath. I was no longer sure of anything, except that something had been irretrievably broken. The following days passed in a strange, almost narcotic state. It was as if the world around me had gone slightly out of focus. My movements became mechanical, each task heavy and uncertain. Work was a blur of deadlines and forced smiles. At home, I moved through the rooms like a guest, monitoring every interaction with forensic attention. I paid notice not out of suspicion for suspicion's sake, but because the alternative was to slip into despair. It was as if my senses were sharpening to compensate for my shattering sense of reality. Aiden was careful, not careful enough to fool me, but just enough to make deniability easy. He hedged every lie with something plausible. Client dinner ran late. The new project is hell on overtime. Didn't you see my text? He spoke with that gentle note of exasperation that implied I was the one pushing too hard, too suspiciously. But where once there was trust, now there was only calculation. I began keeping track, noting what he wore out of the house, when he left, how late he came home, and whether his stories matched his calendar. I took pictures of receipts left in the laundry, snapped photos of mileage on his car when he left, scoured credit card statements for anything that didn't fit our usual patterns. When he returned from his nights away, he brought with him little gifts: flowers, chocolates, a new bottle of wine to share, gestures that seemed almost mocking now, each offering weighted with unspoken apology. Yet there was no confrontation, not at first. I told myself I was gathering proof, that I owed it to myself to know exactly what I was up against before making a move. I clung to the fragments of my old life with trembling hands, unwilling to risk shattering it completely with the force of my own anger. My friends began to notice. "You look tired, Alara," one of them said, her eyes searching mine during a rushed lunchtime coffee. "Is everything all right at home?" I lied. "Just busy. Work is crazy." But she watched me for a little too long, her concern uncomfortably sharp. On the fourth night of this new, ugly normal, I woke in a sweat with his phone's faint buzz echoing in my memory. I rolled over to see him, asleep and oblivious, his body angled away from me. The screen of his phone glowed on the nightstand, and for the first time in our marriage, I allowed myself to do what I'd always considered unforgivable. His phone was unlocked. My fingers hovered for a fractured moment before I began to scroll, first through his messages, then to his emails. Nothing looked amiss at first, just the usual litany of jokes from old friends and work banter. But then I saw her name, Felicity Monroe. My heart stumbled, then thundered. Felicity, the name from Aiden's past that years ago had been little more than a passing curiosity, a story of the woman he'd almost married before meeting me. He had assured me, early in our relationship, that there was nothing left between them. "It's ancient history," he'd said with his easy, dismissive laugh. But here was Felicity now, at the top of his messages. I opened the thread. "Missed you all day," she wrote. "Counting down the hours." Aiden replied, "Same here. Last night was perfect." There were dozens of these exchanges, some sweet, some explicit, some so heartbreakingly intimate that my grip on the phone tightened. And then, a message sent just hours before. "Can't wait to see you tonight, my love. Thinking of you and our little secret." A sick, hollow ache washed over me. Our little secret. My world narrowed to those 3 words, mocking and final. Tears stung my eyes. I wiped them away furiously, unwilling to let myself break. Not now, not yet. I swallowed my scream. Instead, in a daze, I took screenshots of everything. Messages, emails, photos, every piece of evidence I could find. My hands shook, but my mind was weirdly calm. A clinical detached focus overtook me. By the time Aiden awoke and shuffled into the bathroom, humming low to himself, I had already replaced the phone in its charging cradle. I sat on the edge of the bed, my face carefully neutral. When he emerged, toweling his hair dry, he barely glanced at me. He didn't notice anything was wrong, and I suddenly realized how invisible I had become in my own home. How easy it was now for him to exist in his own compartmentalized bubble. The life we'd built together reduced to just another convenience. A mask he wore for public consumption. He leaned down to kiss my forehead, his lips pressing coldly to my skin. I flinched, but he didn't notice or care. He dressed, checked his phone, and left for work. The echo of the front door closing was thunderously final. That was when the tears came. Silent and unstoppable. Not from heartbreak, but from a burning, cold resolve. They had no idea who they were dealing with, or what I was capable of, now that the truth was unveiled. The hours that followed were a haze, the house thick with a stifling quiet broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the quartz clock above the sink. My cheeks were salty with tears I didn't remember shedding. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror for what felt like hours. My eyes, bloodshot and hollow, looked like they belonged to someone else, someone haunted. But beneath the devastation, something else had begun to take root. A cold, analytical edge that I barely recognized. I sat at the kitchen table, my phone open, piecing together a digital map of their affair. Dates, times, locations. Dinner reservations on nights I'd spent alone, hotel stays booked under a work account, overlapping events that made his excuses unravel like poorly stitched seams. The pain was still there, sharp and unrelenting, but underneath, a furious clarity propelled me forward. If nothing else, I deserved honesty. I needed to know the breadth and depth of this betrayal, not just for my sanity, but because knowledge was now my only armor. Aiden moved through the next days as if nothing had changed, scheduling early meetings, coming home late from client dinners, answering his phone in hushed tones just out of earshot. He was so practiced, so confident in his duplicity, that I wondered how long the performance had been going on. Weeks? Months? Longer? I played my part flawlessly. I smiled at breakfast. I asked about his day. I laid my head on his shoulder while we watched TV, my mind cataloging every word, every inconsistency. At night, I lay in bed, feigning sleep, listening to his breathing, waiting for that second phone buzz after midnight. The house felt haunted. Our routines became painful pantomimes. When our friends joined us for dinner one Friday, their laughter ringing off the kitchen walls, I felt utterly alone, adrift on a tiny, sinking island surrounded by people who didn't see what I saw. Not one of them suspected what was unraveling inside this picture-perfect life. It wasn't only Aiden's betrayal that made me feel invisible. It was the complicity of silence, the way nobody wanted to look deeper, to question, to risk shattering the fragile facade of suburban happiness. Even my own parents, when I called them one night and heard my mother's gentle voice asking if everything was all right, sounded content just to take "I'm fine" for an answer. One afternoon, desperate for clarity, I opened Aiden's laptop while he was in the shower. He never changed his passwords. It was a point of pride, a relic of our years of trust. My heart hammered as I logged in and scrolled through his emails. There was nothing outright damning, but tucked away among work memos and project drafts were saved calendar invites, weekend getaways, restaurants. She had even sent him links to prenatal clinics. Prenatal clinics. The words registered with a jolt. I clicked through, piecing together a timeline. Felicity was pregnant. That was the little secret. I sat back, ice filling my veins. The weight of what this meant settled upon me with sickening clarity. My husband hadn't just had an affair. He was building another life entirely. The messages, the gifts, the hotel rooms, all of it was suddenly dwarfed by this. She was carrying his child. For a moment, all the air left the room. I had given Aiden everything. My love, my loyalty, my best years. Now, his future, a future I'd once believed was ours alone, was growing inside another woman. The humiliation burned in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I would not let either of them see me break. Not now. From that point on, something changed in me. The heartbreak curdled into a cold, righteous resolve, like steel hammered thin but stronger for it. If this was war, then I would not be the victim quietly swept aside. I would see every truth, collect every scrap of evidence, and face them on my terms. There would be no more blind faith, no more pretending. I wanted the full, unvarnished truth, and I wasn't going to stop until I had it. The days that followed were a study in self-control. I moved through our life like an actor playing a familiar role, careful not to arouse suspicion. Aiden continued his well-rehearsed charade, but now I was watching, really watching, every twitch, every change in habit, every careless slip of his tongue. I started a journal, timestamps, locations, snippets of overheard conversations. I became frighteningly efficient, cataloging details no one else would notice. The restaurant receipts stopped being random. On some nights, the name of the waiter appeared, and it matched a voice message I later found from Felicity, describing the best Italian place downtown. The puzzle pieces clicked into place one by one, transforming my heartbreak into a meticulous investigation. I seldom slept. My mind reeled every night, replaying moments that now appeared in a new and damning light. His insistence on late meetings, the new cologne, even the increased gym visits. It was as if the past several months had been a carefully choreographed performance, with me cast unwittingly as the background extra to his leading role. But then, everything shifted one Saturday morning. Aiden was in the shower, the water drowning his off-key humming. I absent-mindedly padded through the bedroom, collecting laundry. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. A long, insistent buzz. The urge to ignore it battled against the desperate need for answers that now scorched inside me. Almost involuntarily, my hand reached for the device. It was unlocked. I had already seen the messages with Felicity, but something in me, a compulsion driven by days of anxiety and humiliation, told me to look again. The newest message was a simple picture. An ultrasound, labeled with Felicity's name and a date. Under it, she'd written, "It's real. You're going to be a dad." Aiden's reply was pure euphoria. "Can't believe this is happening. I'll talk to her soon. We'll figure everything out." I stared at the image, my exhale ragged and heavy. This was no longer speculation. This was a new reality, as concrete as my own reflection. I took screenshots, feeling as though my body might split open, then shuffled through the rest of the conversation, searching for any cracks in their narrative. It was all declarations, promises, and practical planning. Aiden wanted to be with her. He was preparing for fatherhood. I set the phone down and walked outside into the sharp chill of morning. The lawn was damp, the air heavy with the promise of rain. My mind raced. How long had Felicity known she was pregnant? Had she planned this? Did Aiden even realize the enormity of what he was risking? Not just his marriage, but everything we'd built together? That afternoon, determination replaced shock. I cleared my schedule for the week and called in a few carefully worded favors. If Felicity really was pregnant and Aiden believed he was the father, I needed to know every detail. How the timelines overlapped, whether the stories matched, where their lies began and ended. I started with what I could access most easily: our finances. Aiden's credit card statements arrived on my laptop, full of strange charges, boutique purchases, dinners at upscale restaurants, flower deliveries I'd never received. There were entire lines of expenditure to places where neither of us had ever been. But the one that caught my eye and changed everything was a mysterious withdrawal. Cash, taken out a week before Felicity's ultrasound appointment. For the first time, a sick sense of anticipation knotted in my stomach. I wasn't following a trail toward heartbreak anymore. I was chasing a conspiracy. That was when I made a decision. I would find Brenda. Brenda, I remembered, was a colleague of Felicity's from years ago. She and I had crossed paths before, at a party thrown by mutual friends. I'd always found her both perceptive and brutally honest, a sharp contrast to Felicity's curated, performative charm. If anybody knew what Felicity was hiding, it was Brenda. With my hands trembling only a little, I messaged Brenda on social media, crafting words that walked the line between desperate and casual. Her reply was swift. "Meet me for coffee tomorrow. there's a lot you need to hear. The next morning dawned gray, heavy clouds pressing low as if forecasting the conversation ahead. I dressed with unusual care, wanting armor, not comfort, a crisp blouse, blazer, dark jeans. When I arrived at the little cafe Brenda had chosen, I found her already seated in a window booth, nursing a steaming mug of black coffee. She looked up, her eyes sharp but not unkind, her mouth set in a line that said she already knew the topic at hand. "Alara," she greeted, sliding a menu toward me, though she knew I wasn't hungry. "You doing okay?" No small talk, no pretense. I appreciated that. I hesitated before answering, but Brenda held my gaze, unwavering. "Not really," I admitted quietly. "That's why I'm here." She nodded, sighing. "Felicity's made a mess of things. I figured it was only a matter of time before you reached out." We talked for a moment about nothing. The weather, the poor excuse for croissants the cafe offered. Then Brenda's tone shifted. "She told you about the baby then," Brenda said softly. I nodded, voice tight. "Does Aiden know?" She looked away, exhaling slowly. "Oh, he knows. She's been broadcasting it. But Alara, there's something you need to know." She hesitated, choosing her words with care. After Mark left her, he was her boyfriend just before she got back with Aiden. She was a disaster. That was, how long ago now? Maybe 4 months. She told me she'd found out she was pregnant right after he walked out. She was a wreck. I mean, I had to drive her to the doctor when she started freaking out. She kept crying, saying she didn't know how she'd raise a baby alone. The world seemed to slow. I gripped the edge of the table, my mind whirring. She was already pregnant. Before she and Aiden started seeing each other again? Brenda nodded grimly. Yes. She claimed she didn't know for sure at first, but she definitely found out right after Mark left. A wave of nausea crashed through me. The numbers, the timeline, the hidden messages. Suddenly, it all clicked together. Felicity's little secret had never belonged to Aiden at all. Had she been stringing him along on purpose? The betrayal twisted and deepened, raw and ugly. I swallowed hard, gathering my thoughts. "Are you absolutely sure?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Brenda's gaze didn't waver. "Positive. I was there." She was desperate for someone to step up. When Aiden started talking to her again, it was like all her problems had a solution. I couldn't keep watching, so I stopped picking up her calls. For a long moment, I stared at my untouched coffee. The pain of betrayal was now mingled with something else. Disgust. Not just with Aiden, but with Felicity's calculated manipulation. "Thank you, Brenda," I said, each word weighted with gratitude and exhaustion. "You have no idea how much it means to finally know the truth." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You deserve better than either of them. Don't let her rewrite your story." Something hardened in me. I no longer felt like the collateral damage of their affair. I felt dangerous. I knew what I needed to do. I left the cafe with new purpose and a single goal: find incontrovertible proof. Felicity and Aiden's elaborate lie was ending, here and now, on my terms. The rest of that day passed in a blur, my mind a restless engine turning over the same facts again and again. The conversation with Brenda had etched itself into my memory, each detail replaying like a damning refrain. Felicity had been pregnant before Aiden ever reappeared in her life. Every time I thought about it, the pieces rearranged themselves into a truth I could no longer avoid. Aiden had not just betrayed me, he had been thoroughly and shamelessly duped. But now I needed proof. Not just Brenda's word or my own suspicions, but something that could not be explained away by lies or wishful thinking. I spent the afternoon searching, making calls, trawling through digital breadcrumbs. There was a moment of panic when I worried the evidence might not exist, that Felicity had covered her tracks too well. But she was arrogant, I reminded myself. She believed she was untouchable. That kind of confidence always left traces. I started with the prenatal clinic. Felicity had sent Aiden a picture of an ultrasound, dated and stamped with the clinic's name. I called the office, pretending to be Felicity's assistant, using the information from the messages I'd found. After a few polite inquiries and some fabricated urgent employment paperwork, I managed to confirm the date of her first appointment. It matched exactly with what Brenda said. Felicity had been in for a consultation almost immediately after Mark left her. The doctor's name, the timeline, the insurance records, it all lined up, meticulously and damningly. I saved the call logs and the emails I'd just received. The evidence formed a new knot in my stomach, this one tight with anticipation. Next, I dug into social media. Felicity's account was locked down, but her best friend Clara posted often and carelessly. There, buried among selfies and vacation shots, was an innocuous post from 5 months earlier, a blurry photo of Felicity at a bar, a hand on her tiny, barely perceptible bump, her other hand entwined with Mark's. The caption was a simple, teasing, "Mama-to-be needs mocktails." The post was still tagged with Felicity's profile, another piece of the puzzle, one I promptly screenshotted. Piece by piece, I assembled a file. Screenshots, appointment records, dated images. The evidence was undeniable. No narrative twist, no emotional plea could negate the sheer weight of these facts. That evening, I sat in front of my laptop, my face illuminated by the harsh blue of the screen. I felt strangely calm. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my power. I was done being a supporting character in someone else's melodrama. Now, I just needed to choose my moment. It was time to confront them both. Aiden and Felicity would see, for once, the strength that lies on the other side of betrayal. I gathered my evidence, printed the most damning documents, and slid them into a plain, unmarked folder. The plan was simple. I would invite them both to our house, neutral ground, familiar but now weaponized by my knowledge, and give them each an opportunity to destroy their lies in person. It was not kindness that made me do it. It was the need for closure, for truth, for the satisfaction of exposing their secrets not with tears, but with incontrovertible facts. And as I looked around our home, I no longer felt its walls closing in. Instead, I felt a strange anticipation, cold and electrifying. I was ready. Their reckoning was coming. And this time, I would not be the one left in ruins. The invitation went out the next morning, a brief message to Aiden, a politely worded text to Felicity. I need to see both of you together. My home, tomorrow at 7 p.m. No delays, no excuses. I kept my words bland, businesslike. I wanted neither of them to anticipate what was coming. The energy in me was volcanic, anger fused with crystal clarity. I would not allow tears or hysterics to define my confrontation. Cold, precise truth would do the work. Aiden was first to respond, replying almost instantly. Both of us? Is this really necessary? I answered with a single, emotionless line. It's time to end the secrets. Felicity took longer, but when her reply came, it was as clipped as mine. We'll be there. I sensed from her brevity a confidence that stung. She still believed herself invulnerable, sheltered by Aiden's loyalty and her own convincing narrative. The next day passed in a tense ritual of preparation. I cleaned the house with mechanical thoroughness. Every sweep of the vacuum somehow symbolic, as if scrubbing the last vestiges of my old life from the floorboards and curtains. By afternoon, I had prepared coffee, water, glasses, and most importantly, the folder of evidence, placed neatly in the center of the dining table. I dressed with deliberation, choosing a simple black dress and tying my hair back, my expression severe, my posture upright. I wanted to project control, detachment, and a refusal to be pitied. The clock rolled toward evening. The sky outside was streaked in bruised lavender and gold, the air humming with the high-voltage tension of an impending summer storm. At precisely 7:02 p.m., the doorbell rang. Aiden entered first, looking nervous, eyes darting around the house as if searching for something he recognized. Felicity followed soon after. Dressed in soft pastels, her hair styled in loose waves, she carried herself with gentle fragility, a performance that struck me now as theatrical and a little malicious. We sat at the table. I poured water for all of us, the silence heavy as wet velvet. Aiden looked at me, confusion and apprehension warring on his face. What is this, Alara? I placed the folder on the table, my hand steady. It's very simple. No more lies. No more pretending. I met Aiden's eyes, then Felicity's, letting the gravity settle in. I know everything: the affair, the pregnancy, and the truth about who the father really is. Felicity paled, but forced a small, tremulous smile. Alara, I raised a hand, cutting her off. Don't insult me, Felicity. I have proof. And so does Aiden, if he chooses to open his eyes. I opened the folder and slid the documents across the table. Brenda told me what happened after Mark left you. The prenatal appointment records confirm your pregnancy started before you reconnected with Aiden. These, I said, laying out the ultrasound dates, insurance documents, and the photo from Clara's feed, all speak for themselves. Aiden picked up the papers, his hands trembling as he scanned them. The color drained from his face. Felicity reached for his wrist, but he recoiled as if burned. I loved you, Aiden, Felicity whispered, voice just above a whimper. I just needed help. He stared at her, anguish and betrayal twisting his features. You said I was the only one, and I believed her, I said softly, until the facts made that impossible. You both lied to me, but Felicity lied to you too. The child isn't yours. The true father left before she even reached out to you. For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic tick of the wall clock, solemn and final. If either of you want to argue with facts, I said, be my guest. But I'm done. I'm filing for divorce. Felicity, I suggest you contact Mark, the real father. That part isn't my concern anymore. I stood, feeling stronger and steadier than I had in weeks. Our home will no longer serve as your confessional or your hiding place. Please leave. Felicity silently gathered her purse. Her face was rigid, stunned to silence. Aiden's shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the evidence as if willing it to vanish. They walked out without a fight. At the threshold, Aiden looked back once, but I turned away, not granting him the comfort of my gaze. The doors closed behind them. The silence that followed was vast, but this time, it was a silence I welcomed. Clean. Absolute. My house was my own again, filled only with the truth. I spent the rest of the evening in a strange suspension, my movements slow and purposeful, as if any sudden gesture might shatter the fragile peace that had finally settled over my home. I poured myself a glass of wine and wandered from room to room, seeing the space anew. There were echoes, of course, memories flickering at the edges, laughter by the stove, kisses by the front door, soft footsteps on the stairs. But now, instead of stabbing pain, those echoes seemed almost gentle, remnants of a life I had both lost and outgrown. It was later, as the night grew long and the world outside darkened into soft, indistinct shapes, that the enormity of what I'd done washed over me. My marriage was ended. The life I had spent years protecting, sometimes blindly, sometimes stubbornly, was over with a single act of truth-telling. I waited for the grief, the panic, the ragged need to call someone and take it all back. But there was only quiet. I stood at the window for a long time, watching the city lights shimmer. I thought about Aiden, wondered if he was replaying the collision of facts, the look in my eyes as I'd handed him the truth. Would he regret it? Would he hate me? Would any of it matter anymore? Or had we both slipped past some invisible point of no return? The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before I checked the screen. It was a message from Aiden. A single line. I'm sorry, Alara. For everything. I don't know what else to say. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the reply button. There was so much I could say. Anger, accusation, a plea for something none of us could ever recover. Instead, I simply turned the phone over, screen down. I wasn't ready for confessions or prolonged goodbyes. I cleaned up what little mess was left from earlier. 2 untouched glasses of water, a lone napkin still folded on the table. I wiped the surface, my hands steady, and realized with quiet astonishment that I was not shaking. I was not falling apart. I was still here, and astonishingly, I was free. When I went to bed that night, I left the bedroom door open, windows wide to catch the night air. Sleep came easily for the first time in months, deep and unbroken. In the morning, I woke to sunlight pooling across the floor, soft and hopeful. There was no clawing dread, No aching sense of loss, just a clean, buoyant relief. Somehow, I had survived the end. I got dressed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table watching the city wake up. My home, once held hostage by secrets and suspicion, had become my sanctuary again. The quietness was profound, but this time, I welcomed it. There was nothing left to hide from, nothing left to prove. For the first time since the tremor began, I allowed myself to imagine a future unscripted by betrayal or fear, and it felt, incredibly, like a beginning. Days passed, each one easier than the last. The routines that once felt suffocating resumed their shape, but without Aiden's shadow, they became something else. Rituals of reclamation. I filled the house with music again, bought fresh flowers, rearranged the living room. The kinds of changes that signaled quietly that this space was truly mine. Friends called, wary at first, offering sympathy in small doses, but I felt no need either to accept pity or hide my relief. I told the truth, in measured words, to those who deserved it. To the rest, I left only the facts. On a rainy Thursday, Brenda messaged, "Just a quick, thinking of you. Let it all burn if it has to. You'll be fine." It made me smile. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed seeing myself through the eyes of someone who told the truth. Always. We made plans to meet for dinner, and I did not hesitate. Unburdened from the need to explain, I felt lighter, more alive. There were moments, a pair of shoes left by the door, the faint scent of cologne on old coats in the hallway, when old memories resurfaced, sad but not destructive. Each time, I let them come. Let myself remember the good and the bad, not erasing or rewriting, only accepting. The pain did not vanish, but it lost its power to paralyze. The world outside continued its relentless turning. The sun set and rose, children played in the street, someone somewhere fell in love, or out of it. My own heart, bruised and healing, learned new rhythms. I volunteered at the shelter down the block, took long walks in the evenings, read entire novels in a single sitting. I rebuilt my voice, my laughter, and each time I did, I marveled a little at my own stubbornness. I was not as fragile as I once thought. One balmy evening, with the scent of night-blooming jasmine drifting through the open window, I stood on my porch and looked out at the city below. There was a kind of peace in it, a deep, resonant stillness that steadied and uplifted me. The silence, once filled with suspicion and dread, had become a companion. It reminded me that not all losses were ruinous, that sometimes survival is not about clinging, but about letting go. The last sliver of sunlight dipped beneath the horizon, gilding everything in gold. I closed my eyes, breathed in the perfumed air, and felt, truly, finally, unbreakable. They thought they could destroy me. They only revealed what I was capable of surviving. As darkness settled gently outside, I whispered to the night, a silent promise to myself, a simple, binding truth. I am still here. I am whole. And I will never again mistake silence for peace, nor peace for weakness. This was not an ending. It was only ever the beginning.